Load it up, but we have Chris this year from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority here that's going to dive into a lot of the specifics around the Community Development Block Grant Program. And I know I kind of mentioned the importance of that when I spoke to our housing stock work group, right? We've identified this tool and this resource as providing a lot of opportunity for our region. And we already have the $8 million allocated. So I really would like to see if our region can use all that money before, or at least submit applications for most of that money before the next October funding round is our goal. Because I can't guarantee that it'll roll over or that it'll still be available. So we really want to make sure that we're removing barriers and demystifying this source of funds and how we can use it to support housing in our communities. So we're very excited to have Chris and Julie here today. And without further ado, I'll let you guys take over.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Lucian, the Community Development Block Grant Manager in the Neighborhood Development Division of MISTA. And the Neighborhood Development Division, our main product, the main thing that we do is administer this My Neighborhood program. I want to introduce, Julie, would you mind standing up for a second? I also want to introduce Julie Chant, who is a CDBG grant specialist and one of the senior members of our team. She has a number of grantees that she works with in this region. And then also, I just find that a lot of times when we're talking to folks in communities, they most often want to hear from their peers about that have experience using these funds or manage these programs to sort of figure out how do you do this work. Julie's closer to that work, so she's going to spend some time talking a little bit about some of her experiences and share some of her knowledge about our programs as well. She'll come up in a second and help with some of this. Just real quick, how many folks in the room are familiar with the My Neighborhood program? Just about everybody. Okay. So it sounds like folks have a pretty basic knowledge. I'll go over some of this real quickly just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, but we won't spend a ton of time with it. Okay, so My Neighborhood is, each funding round has been about $60 million. We had a funding round last May. We had a funding round last October. We anticipate having another funding round this coming October. It's a blend of state and federal resources. So the state resources, about $30 million comes from the Housing Community Development Fund. The federal source of funds is the Community Development Block Grant dollars from HUD. So everyone here is familiar with the regions, and we just looked at the map. We have a regional allocation strategy, so every region gets is allotted both HCDF or Housing Community Development funds and the federal CDBG funds. The My Neighborhood program consolidates all of MISTA's legacy programs, the NEP program, My Home, MISTA Mod, a lot of the other smaller programs that we had that invested in housing. We probably have about maybe 5 or 6 times the resources we had across all those programs now going into the My Neighborhood program. So it's one-stop shop. Essentially, you propose your housing activities and then we pair you with the right resource. Sometimes we have to make some tweaks to your project proposal in order to get it to fit the requirements of a resource. But we don't expect folks generally to come in with a lot of knowledge about the ins and outs of the rules of the program. Or the funding source. So the idea was that folks would just come forward with their idea, we pair them with the resource and go from there. The HCDF funds generally, they're available to nonprofits, developers, local governments, a wider array of applicants for those dollars. And so they've tended to go a little quicker than the Community Development Block Grant resources. So today I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the Community Development Block Grant dollars, as Emily mentioned. One other piece about My Neighborhood, you can come in for 3 different levels of funding based on the experience of your organization. So if you regularly manage housing grants or you do housing development as a regular part of your business, then you are eligible to come in for grants up to $2 million. For CDBG funds, that's been actually capped because of the state's consolidated plan and the rules that govern it, spending of CDBG funds at $500,000. But we're going to expand that in a couple of weeks, so we'll talk about that. If you have a little bit of housing experience, you can come in for up to $400,000, and then the beginner level. So if you're just getting started, you're an emerging developer, or you're a community that hasn't had much experience managing a housing grant, you can come in for a grant up to $200,000. And I would just say that I would say almost half of the grants that we've made are smaller grants, either beginner or intermediate level. We have a lot of emerging developers coming forward, folks that haven't done this work before, or communities that don't have a long history of managing housing grants trying this out. And that does present some challenges. It does tend to mean that we're a little slower out of the gate in terms of getting some of these projects up and running because there's a lot more coaching involved. Folks get acquainted with the programs and figuring out how to manage them. But I do think it's encouraging, and I think it's a big part of building this housing development ecosystem across the state. I think this is a part of bringing people along, getting more people engaged and trying to address our housing crisis. This map is actually available in the back, so if you want to print out of this and you want to take it with you, this shows the regions and then shows the areas in the city or the state that already receive a direct allocation of CDBG funds from HUD. So they're in red, and these are called entitlement communities. And then all the areas in blue, if you're in one of those areas, you're a non-entitlement community. And so the state receives the balance of the CDBG funds for all the non-entitlement areas and administers those funds. And so for my neighborhood CDBG dollars, we serve all the non-entitlement areas. So Battle Creek, where I'm from, Kalamazoo, Benton Harbor, there's a few others, Niles, Portage, are entitlement communities, so aren't eligible to apply for CDBG funds. They can apply for my neighborhood, so the other state funds are there. They can apply for those dollars to fund housing programs or projects in their area. In order to access the CDBG dollars, you have to be a unit of general local government. So local governments can partner with nonprofit partners or a developer to help with a project, implement a project, but they have to be the lead grantee when applying for the program. Currently, the activities that we're funding with CDBG dollars are homeowner rehab, rental rehab, and reconstruction. We'll jump into each of these. We're going to be announcing on the 17th a couple of other activities that we're going to start funding, so some new uses of the dollars. We'll talk about that in a minute. Rental rehab is essentially similar to the programs, the rental redevelopment or rental rehab programs that have been offered through Mr. MEDC in the past. Typically in mixed-use environments in downtowns or along corridors. It's small scale, so it's 2 to 7 units. 51% of the units that are assisted have to be for low or moderate income buyers, folks that are at 80% area median income or less. So if you're doing 2 units, you can have one that's market rate and one that's affordable. But then thereafter, you have to round up. So if you do 3 units, 2 of those have to be affordable, 1 could be market rate. Just in terms of readiness, this is true of most of my neighborhood. We are looking to fund shovel-ready projects. So, having a completed phase 1 at the time of application is essential. So that we've got a handle on what the environmental concerns are and how you'll treat them. you'll have to submit architectural plans, zoning approval, and proof of your leveraged funds. So really, you want to make sure that you've got all the funds documented and sort of committed to the project at the time of application. Reconstruction activity is a way to do some new construction. CDBG dollars generally can't be used to do new construction. Reconstruction is if you've had a recent demolition, which is defined as 1 year from the time that we release the funds. So that'd be October of 2023. You can do some infill housing on that same site. It has to be a residential site. So generally it works best in those situations where you're in a residential neighborhood, you demolish a blighted property, and then it allows you to build back something similar. So you can't increase the number of units. That's a regulatory issue. It has to basically be the same kind of housing that was there before. It can have additional bedrooms or be a little bit larger in terms of the footprint. This works best for land banks or other entities that are already holding title to land or actively engaged in doing demolition. We've had actually a couple of these. We have at least one in this region, right? In Cass County or right, Casablanca. Okay. Cass County. So folks have used modular construction for these. This will help. All right, Julie, you want to come up? We'll talk through. We spend a little bit more time talking about homeowner rehab simply because it's an easier activity for folks to do. So,
thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. I gotta look up there. Sorry. So for homeowner rehab, you're allowed to do up to $40,000 per unit, and that can be done with substantial rehab projects or if you're looking to do something specific, like we have some grantees that are looking to do roofs only, some that are doing energy efficiency and or accessibility. Those are things that you can do through the homeowner rehab as long as it's under that $40,000 cap. CDBG assistance for this, under $10,000, it would be considered a grant with no repayment. Over $10,000 is a zero interest, zero payment loan that will be forgivable after 5 years and is secured by a second mortgage. I know that's one thing that I've spoke with some of my grantees about. Excuse me, is trying to be clear where the 10,000 is and what that means for the homeowner as you're working through rehab. I think the loan may scare some people, so we want to make sure that everyone does understand it's forgivable after 5 years. Participants must provide proof of ownership, insurance income, and be current on taxes at the time of application. I see a hand.
On the payback, what happens if somebody passes away during that time or they move during that time? What is it, a prorated amount for payback, or how's that work?
yeah, it's not actually prorated. Sometimes programs are designed that way, and initially they decided to have it all have to be paid back for 5 years. There are options as long as the house continues as affordable housing. Then there are some options in terms of how to this one could go to another family member, or it can be sold to a low income buyer. And pass that benefit on.
All right. Some of the requirements for the program are 100% of the assisted households must meet the low and moderate area income, as Chris mentioned earlier, the 80% or below the AMI. You must own the property and occupy it for at least 12 months. And you must be current on insurance and not delinquent on taxes. One thing to mention there is if they're on a deferred payment plan for taxes, that is allowed, but as long as they're not delinquent on them. Property requirements must be located within the boundaries, must confirm the condition and the need for having rehab. Mobile homes are not eligible unless they are permanently affixed, which means that we usually ask for an affidavit of affixture. Sorry, sometimes I can't say that word very well. And repairs on attached units are limited to non-shared items. I think I'm going to hand it back to Chris at this point.
Well, actually, skip a couple of these slides here. I do like to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the benefits of doing a homeowner rehab program. I know with the housing crisis, a lot of us are focused on creating new units, and that's important. But homeowner rehab programs can do an awful lot for local governments, and be a part of a larger housing strategy, do some meaningful work. And so I know that a lot of these will be familiar and things that you're already thinking about, but I like to lift them up when we're thinking about these activities and when you're considering whether or not to apply for a grant and which activities might make sense for your community. The first thing about doing a homeowner rehab program is it demonstrates responsiveness. So sometimes we're focused on our downtown areas or some big development that we have in mind that's going to solve a lot of problems for us, and people in neighborhoods feel left out. And this is a way to say, hey, here's something for folks in the neighborhoods, folks that are already there as well, right? So create some equity there between those two situations. Cost avoidance. It helps local families avoid escalating costs associated with deferring the maintenance. So that roof problem is a $10,000 problem now, but it's $20,000 problem in 2 years. These are folks without resources. So that is not uncommon for these expenses to increase. And if you have an intervention program, that's just helping to keep more money in people's pockets so that it can get spent in your community or on other needs. Energy efficiency. You can design these programs so that you're creating ongoing savings for families as they go into the future, helping to sustain them in that housing. Preserves housing stock, reduces the loss of housing due to deferred maintenance. And I used to work with the city of Battle Creek in community development. I did a lot of data analysis alongside just the managing the programs that we managed. And coming out of the housing foreclosure crisis, about a third of all the buildings that we got on our vacant and dangerous buildings list were the result of folks just deferring maintenance for 10 or 15 years. A lot of times seniors who couldn't afford those costs. And that property, because we never did intervene, or no one did intervene, resulted in us having to demolish it or to ask the Calhoun County Land Bank to help us out and demolish the property. But it was a cost to taxpayers. And then at the end of the day, how many houses did we lose through all of that? That if we had those units today, could be housing folks. Integrated housing strategies. This pairs with a lot of other housing strategies you're already implementing. So beyond just sort of the equity piece, our analysis of our housing interventions in Battle Creek maybe 10 years ago, if we were doing a big rehab project like buying a house that was blighted, fixing it up, making it the nicest house on the block and reselling it, we'd get about $3 back for every dollar we invested in increases in surrounding property values. We were successfully changing the trajectory of housing markets on the north side of Battle Creek. A demolition, removing that blighted property, cost us a lot less, and we get $14 back for every dollar we spent. You can't demolish the way to success, right? Or a successful or thriving neighborhood. But those kinds of strategic interventions paid off better. Code compliance, a code compliance activity where you're just helping to move the market, the whole neighborhood forward to maintain their housing stock, paid off even better. And those were small investments. The problem is code compliance is often not very popular. Having a homeowner rehab program that pairs with these other strategies that you're implementing helps ensure that folks have a resource problem and aren't able to just their home, have some resources to be able to make those repairs. And it just makes implementing some of your other strategies just that much easier, or creates a sort of comprehensive solution to the neighborhood question.
Yes, so these funds go to individual homeowners. Is the role of government, for local government, is it to oversee the application process for those homeowners, or are government supplying on behalf of administering? I'm trying to see what role the government plays.
Yeah, so we do spend a little bit of time on that in the presentation, but real quickly, I can just say, yeah, we give local governments funds that they then can administer a program.
Okay.
So you won't necessarily know all of your addresses when you apply for funds. You'll just say, we want to operate a homeowner rehab program. Here's how many units we'd like to do, and here's how much money we need to do that. And then you'll go and find the folks that have that need, and communities tackle that in all kinds of different ways. And in terms of who administers, we'll talk a little bit about whether you have the option of administering yourself with your own staff or team, or to bring out some program partners to help you do that. Wealth building, so as the market's heating up, some neighborhoods that never increased in value over the last 4, 5, 6 decades are increasing in value for the first time, or they're seeing more turnover, or their properties are exchanging hands at a better rate. And in some situations, you have gentrifying neighborhoods in this region. We had one community that in this region that applied for a grant to do just to address gentrification in the neighborhood. As properties are increasing in value, helping people with a critical repair keeps them in there and lets them take advantage of that wealth building opportunity that they haven't had for a generation or two. And that's a big deal, right? So this can be an anti-gentrification strategy or help to help people build wealth in those areas. We talked about supporting seniors. If you can help them stay in the place where they're at now, that's a special unit that you don't have, those high demand units that you don't have to build in your community somewhere else. They already have the social networks there. A lot of times they're on a fixed income and they can handle the day-to-day expenses of living where they're at, but it's that big expense that comes along that they can't really tackle that sometimes bumps them out of their house or forces them to make a tough choice. Getting one of these programs in your community is sort of the gateway drug to doing serious housing work, because you can build capacity. You can have someone on your team now that's writing specs, or maybe you're identifying some other program partners that are going to help you be able to do more housing work. So this is sort of a stepping stone as you ramp up to building more capacity locally to do housing work. And then last piece, neighborhood stability, just helping to keep people in their homes. So with all of the CDBG grants, we have some support that we offer, and we want to just talk a little bit about how to sort of get one of these projects rolling. Oh yeah, thank you. So we'll talk about targeting, promoting resources, assembling your staff or program partners, and then the kinds of tools that we provide to help folks administer programs. When, whether it's a project or a program that you're going to run, whatever kind of housing activity, you can define a specific geography that you want to work in. You can work community-wide if you want. You have those options. So we don't have requirements about how you target these resources in your community. The one thing I will point out here that's absolutely critical if you're making any My Neighborhood grant is to tie what you're doing, your housing strategy or your project idea, to the regional plan. So we haven't funded a single project through My Neighborhood, and I think we've funded the creation of 650 units in the last 8 months. Not a single one of those units has been funded without first ensuring that whatever that applicant wanted to do aligned with a specific goal or strategy in the regional plan. So we do take that piece seriously. And as those plans develop, as you're setting priorities for your region, we look at that before we make any of these funding decisions. So if you put together an application and you don't specifically mention how what you're doing aligns with a specific funding goal in your plan, we'll kick it back to you. It's a good idea to use local geographic data, housing studies that you have to flesh out the case for the need for whatever project it is that you're submitting for. For the CDBG side, there are some requirements that go along with those funds. You do have to, once you've prepared an application, so you'll submit an application to us, and then if we pair you with the CDBG funds, we will send you a CDBG application that has a couple additional steps to complete. One of those is you have to hold a public hearing, and you have to invite the community in to offer public comment on the application that you're submitting. It gives you an opportunity to make some tweaks to your application if you want. You do spell out during that process how you'll handle those applications that are coming in. So if you're doing a homeowner rehab program, a lot of folks do first come, first served. Other folks do first qualified, first served, so the first folks to qualify for the program they serve. And then I know, Katie Montoya, I know that you considered doing a lottery. I don't know that you did do a lottery. You want to talk about that for a second? Because that's an interesting piece. No.
I can just say the comment in that, when you're, so for a county program, countywide program, we serve somebody that lives next door to the county building and someone that lives in the very rural area that maybe doesn't have good internet and transportation to get their app in. So we tried to be cognizant of that, and so we took applications for a period of time and allowed everyone to be able to turn their application in. And we reviewed those to make sure they met the minimum standards and requirements for eligibility. And then we actually put all their names in a bucket, and we had our land bank authority draw one by one. So everyone received a number. And so that's how we're serving them. We're starting with number 1 and going through the list till we run out of funds. So as we, and we called the application round a pre-application round because what they believe is income, or they believe their income is, as we actually sit down with them and verify their information, we may find out that they have an IRA or they have, other income that wasn't necessarily, they don't touch, but it's considered an asset. So it's part of that income calculation. Or we find out that, they have multiple properties and, so we have to consider those as assets. So we call it a pre-application list and everyone's in the queue. So we start with 1 and go through the list till we run out of funds. So in the event that, so I don't know what the next steps are, if we run out of funds at number 20 and we still have 54 people on the list, are we able to then apply for more funding and say, we've got a group that have been pre-qualified or pre-eligible. Are we able to keep that list or do we have to restart it? So that's the part I don't have the ... what happens after we run out of funds, because it's a new funding round and everyone has to have the same opportunities. So how do you, keep the placeholders? So it's it's unfortunate in that it's not the perfect way, but it is a fair way to address access, and so it's something I struggle with daily. How do you provide equal access for everyone to be able to utilize the resources and opportunity, but there's no guarantee.
That's right. Yeah, so that's, and there aren't a lot of folks doing that, but that does seem like an equitable way. And then honestly, that does sound like another application to my neighborhood program.
Yeah.
To fund that. Sometimes if we're switching up, that's one of the things where we had all these different programs, is they all had different requirements, funding priorities, or sometimes what it would mean is that you couldn't use the list that you already collected and you had to get a new list because it was a new funding resource. I don't believe that'll be an issue with the CDBG funds. So if you've got a list that was created for your CDBG and we have more CDBG dollars, and you're going to run the program essentially the same thing, I don't believe that'll be an issue. So,
that's nice news. Yeah, that's probably the nice news I've heard.
okay.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking about the home rehab program. This was a provision that I think Liz talked about. How does it work with the 0% interest for that larger rehab? And then they have to get a second mortgage. I guess I don't understand. I love that it's a 0% forgivable loan, but then they have to get a loan and pay interest, or how does that work? I guess I don't know how that works. Tell me how that goes.
So the homeowner rehab projects that we're talking about, the homeowner has their house, their mortgage. We come in, usually they're doing a project that's $40,000 or less, right? Some communities are offering smaller rehab amounts. So that's a choice that each community makes for itself. So if it's offering $20,000 and someone comes in, they really have $30,000 worth of need, then are they scaling the project back and just doing what they can? Or is the homeowner bringing some resources to the table to complete the project? That's sort of up to them. Our portion of it is just that forgivable zero interest loan that just gets forgiven after 8 years, so.
Okay,
Does that answer it?
I guess I thought that you were saying they had to have something to secure that. Cause I was thinking the homeowner, some of them we dealt with didn't have any, they paid off their house and just were basically making tax payments. I was worried they had to get a loan, but it sounds like.
It is a loan. If it's over $10,000, it'll be a loan between the homeowner and Mishta, but it's forgivable after 5 years, so.
Got it. I thought I heard you say there had to be it had to be backed by a second mortgage.
We're just assuming that it would be their second mortgage.
I see.
So it puts a
Okay.
mortgage and a note on the property.
Got it.
So as long as nothing changes within that 5 years, it will just be discharged.
Thank you. I got it. I think I was thinking there was gonna be another step in it. So thank you very much.
That's a good clarifying question. Sometimes we get so used to talking about this that we don't.
Hey, Chris, we got a question in the chat.
Yeah, great,
So the
thanks.
question is, if you're doing the mixed use program as opposed to owner rehab, does the public hearing and application need to be posted?
Yeah, it's pretty much for any expenditure of CDBG dollars, so any of the activities that you can fund with CDBG. And it just happens right on the front end and it's a part of the application process, so. You don't have to worry about that when you apply, just apply, you'll go, we'll show you how to apply in a minute. Once we pair you with CDBG or say, okay, this is a great proposal, we're gonna move forward. We'll send out a document that just sort of explains or walks you through that process and what's involved. So, yeah, but it does mean that you're gonna have a little bit of a delay before you get started, because you'll have to take the time to do a public hearing, and often notice that. There's an authorizing resolution that has to be passed by your local council. So that does create a little hitch, but that's all just required stuff with the federal regs. And on the bottom of this slide too, we just point out that we have templates, we have an editable application. We have lots of tools that help walk you through the process or provide you with a tool so that you're not having to invent all of these things on your own. Do you want to go talk about?
Sure. Okay. So we don't want to discount that we definitely understand that everybody probably knows how to run a program. This is just some of the steps or the individuals that we find that could be very pertinent, but we also don't want to discount the fact that we understand that these 4 positions, the staff may be one person within your office. So as Chris mentioned, there is an authorizing resolution that needs to be signed by the authorized official. That is the person that will essentially be authorizing the application, providing the approval of the grant, signing of the grant, the FSRs, anything that needs to be done through the grant. The program manager, I don't really need, I'm sure I don't need to read this to you guys, but intake specialist working on those applications, and the construction specialist. Those that will actually be doing the inspections, writing the specifications. One thing that we wanted to mention as well is the hiring of a third-party administrator. I know a number of my grantees are doing this in-house, but there is an opportunity to have someone help you through the process. They can be hired to fulfill some of the responsibilities. They must be procured through an RFP or a small purchase process with a minimum of 2 bids. That is something that I know has kind of been a little bit of a process as I walk through this with some of my grantees. TPAs seem to be kind of hard to come by. The procurement process brings no one to your table. So one thing that Mishta is working on is doing an RFQ to put a list of, is it qualified?
Yeah.
Qualified TPAs. For those of you that may have already read our policy manual, we have a list of environmental consultants that we provided. We're gonna hopefully provide the same thing for you for TPAs. So they could be an experienced consultant or a local housing nonprofit. There is, as I mentioned, the policy manual does have some of that. There's a TPA and developers. And then a grant management plan, which I believe Chris will be talking about in a couple minutes as he walks through some of the policy manual with all of you.
Okay, well, Julie mentioned environmental consultants a lot. One of the things that you have to do with all federal grants is do an environmental review of your project. And some of the, for larger projects that can get a bit complicated. For like a homeowner rehab program, it is something that communities that have some experience with it manage for themselves. I think Katie, you did your own environmental review, right?
Correct.
Right, so Calhoun County Land Bank does their own environmental review. So there's a number of communities do it themselves, but for some folks that are getting into this for the first time, it can be helpful to hire an environmental consultant to come in and do that piece of the work. So that's not unusual. And as Julie mentioned, we do have a list of folks that have been vetted through our environmental review division at MSHDA. Construction contractors is also a really big challenge. And I know there's a lot of folks in the room that work on this challenge. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to this, like ways that they're tackling putting together a contractor pool or contractors, getting contractors to do work on a homeowner rehab program.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we have tried to procure some contractors. We've done bid informational sessions. And I think we brought out maybe almost 50 contractors that came out, listened and learned our process for procuring and how to bid on our projects and the qualifications that they needed. And so that was pretty successful. And so we're obtaining a few more bids and we're.
Any other suggestions or ideas about how tackling that? Mandate?
Question, they had to go through a process to be certified to do the program, correct?
Yeah, so for CDBG funds in particular, and I'm not sure exactly what the funds or resources were there, but for CDBG, you would do a request for qualifications. You have to notice that twice. So there's some rules about it. We cover that in our manual. And then once you do the request for qualifications and you create a contractor pool, which just make sure that they're licensed, insured, whatever other qualifications you need them to meet. Then you can leave that pool open for the rest of the year. And as you identify new contractors, you can just add them to the pool. But, and you don't necessarily have to do it that way, but that is a way that a number of communities do it. All right. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the checklist tools, templates, things that we have that might be helpful, especially in this early stages if you're considering applying for a grant of some sort. So we do have a policy manual, and we'll spend a little bit of time looking at that here in a second. Really, we're making really good use of all the hard work of MSHDA in ages past when they were administering county allocation and had a lot of great support tools. We've gone through a lot of those and maybe updated them so that we could use them today. But I don't want to, we've really gotten a lot from the hard work of those folks that came before us. Also, MEDC, we borrowed a lot of tools from them. And so a lot of those are all held in the policy manual. We have a lot of construction management forms. So, model change orders and lien waivers and construction documents, orders to proceed, all the different kinds of documentation that you might need, bid tabulation forms. So a lot of that stuff is there in the policy manual. So you can make use of those. That just sort of helps you manage the construction. So maybe you have someone with the expertise, but the grants management piece about how to document that work may not be something that they're used to. That's there to provide a lot of that support. We have a homeowner project workbook, which I'm actually going to pull up, which is an Excel spreadsheet that's kind of a deep dive on every single aspect of a homeowner rehab project and anything that might come up during the process. Where does it fit and how do you deal with it and what sort of tools are there to help you address it? It gives you a little form to be able to track all those events as you go through the project. And we have that for homeowner rehab and reconstruction, and I believe we'll be creating something like that for rental rehab and some of the other activities that we're coming out with. We do have some training resources, some webinars that are available online in the policy manual webpage. That isn't very robust. I think we just cover 4 or 5 key topics that our first set of grantees, our chill program grantees, there were 34 of those. The topics that they needed some assistance with as they work through the grants. But we'll be looking to do more of those trainings as we go. And then every grantee gets assigned a champion. So Julie's a champion, and she has a portfolio of grants that she manages, and she's there to assist folks, help walk them through the process, identify where their challenges are, and help them move through administering the grant. So that's somebody that you always have at your disposal to contact with any challenges that arise. And if it's not something that she can answer or help with, then Julie reaches out to her other resources, people on the team, and sometimes other peers or folks in the program to help figure out how we can help. This is just the landing page for our policy manual. I'll provide a link to that at the very end. If you have a phone and you want to leaf through this while I'm talking about it, you scan that QR code, it'll pop up. It's on every slide for like the next 5 or 6 slides. But the way this is set up, you can click the first link here and it'll print the entire policy manual for you without the various attachments. After that, it's just set up in chapters. There's 18 chapters, and you can just see it covers various topics related to implementing CDBG funds. Some of these things we don't get into much. We've designed most of the eligible activities that we have so that they don't trigger Davis-Bacon. It's conceivable it could be triggered by some project, but we've tried to take some care to ensure that we're not triggering Davis-Bacon. If it did come up, we've got a chapter on it, covers how to handle Davis-Bacon, and it comes with, whatever forms, tools, checklists you might need to get through that. Similar with acquisition, at this time, we don't pay for any acquisition. Even with reconstruction, you have to be able to, you may have acquisition, but it has to be funded with some other resource. But if you do some acquisition as a part of a project, then there's information there about how to get it done. I want to spend a little bit of time just looking at construction management so you can just see the kinds of forms that we have. And I think this goes on quite a bit, but the first line there is the chapter. So you click on that and you would get all of the text from the chapter on construction management. And then every link after that is, a form, checklist, something else to help with the construction management process. We have a section on procuring third-party administrators and selecting developers. So if you've got a project where you have a property owner that you want to work with, so the local government's going to come in as the lead grantee for the funds, but they're going to turn around, select a developer, or you've got a property owner that you're working with that wants to develop their property, maybe do some rental units. You can select that developer, and this walks you through the process for doing that. The grant management plan, this is a great tool if you're thinking about putting together an application, you're trying to get your head around what's all involved in administering one of these grants. This attachment is particularly useful because it'll walk you through the process of thinking through those very questions. And there's one particular chart that I like. These are sort of all the things that you might have to consider if you're administering the CDBG program. They're just the kinds of things that would come up. So doing those public hearings, thinking about fair housing, Davis-Bacon if it came up. I mentioned it's not likely to. Having a complaint procedure and putting that together. Who's going to do the environmental review? If you're going to hire someone else who's going to oversee that procurement. So it's really granular. And it allows you then to select who's going to do this piece. Is it going to be a grantee? Is it going to be a developer? Or is it going to be some third party that we're going to hire to help us with it? This is good too then for putting together an RFP. If you're going to bring somebody on, you can say, well, which pieces do we think we can handle? And which ones do we really need help with? And then you can use this to start to build your scope of work to hire someone. This is like a chart that's within, it's like a 4-page sort of grant management plan. And this is just a chart that's in there. We have a bunch of different kinds of checklists that are just different tools. So this is a sort of simplified checklist of what are the things, if you're doing a homeowner improvement program, what are the things that we actually have to upload into Michigan's grant management system, the things that we have to document and show. And so this just keys on those aspects of a project. And we break a project down into 6 steps. So you have your applicant eligibility, where you have applications, people are filling them out, and then you're doing income verification. What are the documents from that process that need to get uploaded to our grants management system? Then you go into property evaluation and then into contractor selection. Putting that second mortgage in place if you're going to have a lien on the property that'll get forgiven in 5 years. Managing through construction and then closeout. We have a more comprehensive, the one I mentioned a second ago, more comprehensive workbook. This looks a little complicated. This freaks some folks out, and if that's your reaction to this, you just don't have to open the document. You know, look at it once and then never again. But what this does do is the codes on the left-hand side basically tell you where to go to find the document. Who handles this particular step, and then what kind of support's available. There's these little red triangles in the corner of the cell. If you hover over those provide instructions about what that means or how to do this step. So it's a lot, it's a lot of information in a little amount of space, but it really walks you through every single aspect of that applicant eligibility stage. You can see the application and the income verification packet are still on there. They're highlighted with the red S, meaning, hey, these have to be submitted. But all the other little steps that go along with that. How do I ensure that someone's up to date on their homeowner insurance? It seems like that's pretty straightforward, but there are things that come up that that may raise some questions. And so this gives you some direction. Where do I find information about this? Or what am I looking for? How do I complete this step? So, and in that regard, this can be very helpful. Maybe maybe you're not using this every day to track your activities. Maybe you're run into a problem. You say, where I can find an answer to that really quickly. I go to this checklist, hover over, it'll tell me where to go to find the form or the instructions. So if folks are interested, they can apply today. If you go to the michigan.gov/my neighborhood site, there's an apply now button, big green button. You click on that, get started, just fill out that application. Send your ideas our way. We'll consider it and be in touch. If you have an idea and you want to talk through it, we are happy to schedule consultations. I brought some of my cards, and I think Julie has some of hers. We tend to spend about 30 minutes talking through an idea with someone, but we can just talk through, and I've done that with a number of folks in this room, and multiple times sometimes, and happy to do that to help folks think through what are the challenges and putting an application together. So our contact information, so you can also send an email to us at mishta-ndd@michigan.gov. And that is the mailbox for our division. And if you contact us either with a question, we'll respond to you, or if you want to connect with us to schedule a consultation, that's a great way to do it as well. I want to preview an announcement we're making on March 17th. We have modified the state's consolidated plan to allow folks to apply for up to $1.5 million in CDBG funds. It would still be subject to the leveraging requirements of my neighborhood. So for every dollar over $400,000 that you apply for, you have to have a $1 match. But it does allow folks to come in for a larger CDBG award if they elect to. And keep in mind, you can do different activities. So if you want to do a homeowner rehab activity and also do a reconstruction project or some reconstruction projects, you can do that. You can pair those activities together in one application. We are also adding infrastructure that supports the development of housing. We'll have a definition of exactly what that means on the 17th, but we will be we can do infrastructure as a standalone. So if you have a large, a new development that it hasn't been eligible for CDBG funds in the past, you could get some funds to be able to do some of the infrastructure related to that new development. That is an eligible use. And we are looking at a couple other eligible uses of the funds. So if you scan the QR code, it takes you to a sign up where you can get that announcement on the 17th directly to your email. In terms of that preview, oh, the other piece of that I want to preview is the My Neighborhood process, the green button that you click to apply now, you can do that, but on the 17th, we're going to be opening up a new way to access CDBG dollars through My Neighborhood. Folks will be able to fill out a letter of intent form, which is about a page. It's mostly like your name, phone number, what activities you're interested in implementing, the amount of funds that you think it will take you to implement that idea, and a description of what it is that you'd like to do. I don't think I'm missing anything there. That's about it. So very simple. You'll have 30 days to submit that letter of intent for those resources. And then what we're going to do is set aside funds and give you 4 months to work on your application. That will give folks time to be able to work on their idea, to meet with us, consult with us, connect with some other partners if they want to help them flesh out their idea. We're doing a lot of this activity already, but our hope is that this will push, knowing that funds are set aside for a period of time, will get folks to sort of engage with us a little bit more and sort of commit to moving forward. So
Based on the LOI, you'll get a reservation nonetheless, he said, to kind of reserve the funding while you work through the rest of the process.
okay. Yes. Oh, right behind you, yeah.
Is the $60 million in funding, how is that split across the state?
Yeah, so really we've had 3 different funding rounds with CDBG funds up to this point, totaling $80 million. We have allocated $20 million of that to projects and programs. So what we have remaining is $60 million. So if you go on the My Neighborhood website, there is on that front page, there is a chart that lists all of the available funds for CDBG by region. So, and I think that is the $8 million that, with Emily, did you say that the CDBG funds were $8 million in this region?
Yes, that's what's remaining.
Yeah. So for this region, there's $8 million available, and that's how folks will be able to access. So they can submit a normal application if they want, but I think this process is probably going to be a lot easier and preferable.
So this is still using the money that's already out there for us.
It is. It's not additional, but yeah.
Way to do it.
Yeah, I didn't put this piece together, but yeah. I knew what yeah, well, you put it together, you didn't, they wanted to promote the $60 million. I just knew that I was gonna get that question, right? So, okay, well, actually, we had another question here, so then I'll come to the back.
So a couple of questions. One, how does this launch date affect communities who have already applied for the October 5th, 24 funding and have an application in review? And then also, how does this affect their eligibility for an October of 25 funding round with this?
Well, I don't think it has any bearing on what will happen in October because we haven't written the rules for how those funds will be dispersed. This is really a way to, My Neighborhood has moved through $60 million pretty quickly, in state funding. Most of that state funding, we have a couple of regions that haven't spent their funds down, but a little bit left to go. The CDBG funds have just gone slower. So this is just a way to address that and help community. And really, we're just realizing we need to provide a little bit more support and help folks along. That's been the process so far. We just think this is a better process that sort of reflects how we're making these applications happen anyway, right?
So if the community has an application, if our community currently has an application
Yeah.
in review and it's granted with that application,
Yeah.
are we eligible or ineligible for this?
Yes, so if you've already got an application in for My Neighborhood, so everything gets a timestamp and it will go in order that it's timestamped. So if you want to submit your application ahead of time and get it in so that it has that timestamp, and then by all means, go ahead and do that. We'll work through our normal process. We'll evaluate that idea, pair you with CDBG. In some regards, it might go a little faster. So if you're ready to go.
The time stamp apply to the LOIs as well.
No, so the LOIs will so we'll get all the letters of intent over the course of the first 30 days, and then we'll make some decisions about what to fund. We would love to be in a position where we're having to, where there's some competition. We just haven't come anywhere close to having that experience yet, so.
Will you accept more than one per community?
We only accept one application per community, but you can have multiple activities. Right.
So the rehab dollars can be spent on federal housing. That's like chapter 9.
Actually, probably not. So
Okay.
I have to know, I have to look into that more, just to be sure.
Okay. So it's really for individual privately owned homes.
Yes,
Communities.
yeah. So the
Okay.
homeowner rehab is, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Can I ask what community you are that you are submitted by any of the application?
It's for a Sturgis neighborhood program.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and did you live there? Oh, okay, great. Okay, in the back, there's two questions, so there's one way in the back, let's go there and then we'll.
So the 30 days is from the 17th?
Yeah, so we'll make the announcement on the 17th, it'll have all the details in there, and then it'll run until April. I think it's April 17th.
And then will that
Yeah.
open again, or is it kind of as soon as you lose
Well,
that 30-day period?
I mean, if we don't spend down the funds are gonna be there, we're gonna continue to take applications. Right now, to keep it as something we can manage, we're gonna open up this letter of intent process for 30 days. So the My Neighborhood application button will always be there. But yes, for right now, the letter of intent period is for 30 days. And part of that is, once we make those commitments, if we have dollars left over, like we've committed these CDBG funds to the regions and to this plan. But if we're still running into the problem of spending the funds, we may need to make some other measure to make sure that we're activating these dollars and we're building housing somewhere, right? So the goal is to keep it all in the regions, but we do need to start moving the money and using it to fund projects. So, you know, it's hard to predict exactly where this will go. If we end up with a lot of activity in one region and not in another, I mean, that'll be something we'll have to contend with and address, so.
Our hope is to streamline the process from what it is currently as far as for the CDBG funds. So hopefully with the letter of intent, which is how we started the chill program, that it becomes easier and more manageable to kind of get through the process and get everything started.
So I know that the 17th is when all of those details will come out about how this rolls. But I do have a slight question regarding infrastructure, if that could be answered ahead of time, which is when we're looking at infrastructure to create housing, does that partnership on the backside for the creation of housing have to be ready to go, or a letter of intent signed with the developer, right? Because it's one thing to put in infrastructure, it's another thing to have someone who builds the houses. So does that marriage have to be done on the front end? Or can we come and say, here's a piece of land, we'd like to put infrastructure in to build houses, but we don't have a developer on the backside right now?
Yeah, it would, so. Yeah, I'm hesitant to get too much into the infrastructure piece because there's gonna be, you know, it's not all baked. So, but I would say that the principle of shovel-ready projects is still going to be there for us. So, and we really need to know that this infrastructure investment is gonna be tied to housing. We can't put ourselves in a situation where we're investing a bunch of money in the infrastructure and then it sits for a long period of time. So I would just say in general, our rules will probably steer us away from situations where that's a possible outcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir.
And following up on that infrastructure question, if you have a developer and you have a program or a project working towards, execution, but the developer is also, utilizing the Mr. Brownfield TIF, does that infrastructure piece smash into the Mr. TIF piece in the application?
Well, so we have been talking through that challenge about pairing, particularly with that budget resource. Our goal is not to duplicate resources that are already available for a purpose. So we're trying to focus on things that may not be covered by the TIF.
So if you had a developer that wasn't interested, didn't want to go through that the process of going through the BRA and all that just could be something that.
Well, so I would say that if there are already resources out there to deal with contamination on the site
Oh, right.
or site clearing or stuff like that, then we're probably not going to make CDBG funds available for those same activities. We may focus more on, utility hookups and service lines and sidewalks, something like that. Hopefully that provided you some information without getting me in hot water.
It's a couple of questions in the.
Oh, yeah,
chat
please.
here. What's the percentage that a third-party administrator can charge for services for CDBG?
So we give you 18%. So when you make a request for funds, we ask you to just talk about the project dollars that you want. And then you just say, do I want admin? Yes or no? And if you say yes, then you'll get 18% of whatever it is you requested to help administer the program. So we don't, as long as you've gone through a procurement process to hire that third-party administrator, generally, we're not going to be concerned what you're paying them. If it's over 18%, then you'll be covering some of the costs yourself with some other resource. So. We do encourage folks that, because there are, even if you have a third-party administrator and they're handling a good portion or almost all of the management of that program, there are still going to be some administrative things that you're going to have to cover that are going to be covered by that city person. The authorized official responsibilities cannot be handed off to anybody. So you have to have somebody that's putting in a couple hours a week or something just to provide oversight. And those expenses can be charged to to admin. So we do encourage folks to keep that in mind when hiring a third-party administrator. You may want to pull back some funds if you need to cover like environmental review costs or something else that they're not doing. Is there another question?
Yeah, so does reconstruction have to occur on the same parcel?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been, I'll just be honest with you, it's a very quirky use of the funds. And it's not like this wide lane where we're going to move a lot of money. And it does have to be on the exact same parcel. It has to be substantially similar to what was there before. You can't increase units. And if so there's a lot of challenges with it. Can I go here and then we'll come back?
I just wanted to, can you clarify the date on the reconstruction? I mean, I thought it was just a year from the demolition, but you mentioned October 2023. So what is the time frame for?
It has to be within the past year, but within the past year of what? So from our perspective, it's within 1 year of when we release these dollars to the public. So most recently that was October 1st, of 2024. So we're just saying you can have a demolition that occurred in October of 2023, and that would be an eligible site. But anything before that, under HUD's current definition, we can't. We've been petitioning HUD for a long time to expand that definition to allow us to do anything that was demolished with federal dollars in the past. So all the NSP demolitions that happened around the state, that we can go back and do infill housing on those sites. And as of yet, we have not been successful.
So just to talk that through, if there was a demolition in 2024, that would be eligible, or 2025?
Yeah, so anytime after October, and if you have a demolition that's imminent, and it's a plan underway, you've got another funding source, then we'd entertain that as well, right? So
and this is only in non-entitlement communities.
it's in non-entitlement communities, so everywhere but Battle Creek for you.
Albion.
Yeah, I know, we love spending money in Albion. Yeah. Okay, and
Do all projects need an environmental site assessment?
so environmental review is required for every CDBG funded activity. The level of review varies greatly depending on what kind of project. Just hiring a TPA requires some kind of environmental review. That's an exempt activity, and that's usually checking a couple of boxes and making a basic determination. Something like a rent rehab project may require an environmental assessment at a much higher level of review. So yes, everyone does. For homeowner rehab, we usually do a two-step process where you do an initial review of the community or the target area where you're going to spend the resources, and you answer those questions that you can. And then later you go back once you have the site and you have a much shorter checklist that's built off of that initial review, and it answers the remaining questions. That's usually your consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, check for hazardous materials. Someone else have a question back here?
When you were saying one application per community, is that per funding round then? You could do one.
It is per funding round, yeah. Yeah. You know, and we've had folks that come in, so you have the county wants to do something and the municipality wants to do something. Or it's a group of municipalities that we coming together and pool our resources. So there's lots of ways to do it, and we have the folks that are in the Sturgis area and the surrounding county that have navigated a lot of those questions. So there's some really great resources in the room. If you've got other partners or folks that work in close proximity to your geography, you want to think through some of those issues. They've done some good work on. Any advice you'd have if other folks are considering the same thing, or how did you navigate that, or where did you settle?
I think the biggest thing is, first of all, finding partners that want to do it. You don't want to spend all your time trying to convince a municipality to take free money. Unfortunately, that is the case with a lot of them. You have to over convince them that makes sense for them. So I would say existing partnerships or existing relationships, or even experienced municipalities is the best place to start. Or if you have strong community partners that understand that, like the Sturgis Neighborhood Program, that see the value and the ability to help administer it, then that's definitely the starting point.
Great. And I would throw out there, talking to Katie, who is experienced at this kind of housing activity, been doing it for a long time. We did NSP at the same time, 15 years ago. But there's just this matter of bandwidth. There's so many other things, so many other challenges that folks have to deal with. Is this the right fit for them? So that totally makes sense. And I do think a lot of times it is that trusted partner. One thing that we're seeing, and Julie, maybe speak to this, but we do see in a lot of communities, there's like a nonprofit housing agency that's already doing this kind of work. And sometimes that's the go-to because they're already in that lane doing the work, and that can be a great partnership. The one challenge has been that you have to go out and procure and you have to get 2 bids. So it's a little wonky because you have to go through a competitive process, but hopefully when we get this list of third-party administrators out there, it'll just be easier to solicit some bids and get some other bids. Any questions in the back?
Could you, share a little bit about Great Lakes Housing with everyone? Because I feel like that is a great resource. There could be a great resource for everyone interested in starting a rehab program.
Yeah. So Great Lakes Housing is a nonprofit organization that works statewide. They were started with Mishta. Just to be clear, they aren't affiliated with our division. But they do provide some of those services, so they could help with putting together an application, and they can be someone who bids on administering your program. My guess is that when we put that list together, they'll be on that list. There have been lots of, I would just say, and they are great to work with. They're very experienced, and part of their mission is just to help local governments and other agencies across the state access these dollars. So that is very much a part of their mission and what they're trying to do. So thanks for bringing them up. I would say that there are other agencies doing very similar work. Lion Bear is another one working in the Thumb area out in Saginaw that does some very similar work. They've been meeting with grantees, helping them put together applications, and then later can help with the administration. So sometimes we've had some planning organizations do that same piece, serve in that capacity. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate being here.